This is Jahmai Webster. Jahmai has been out of school since what year?
2008, I graduated May 2008.
2008.
Yep.
Jahmai is now sports anchor reporter in Denver at station
MGH.
KMGH.
Yep.
It is his third station. The first station was in a much smaller city, but not that small actually for a first station. It was Waco, Texas. It was station KRHD, which is related to station KXXV,
Yep.
where we've had a number of people start their careers. And instead of talking about the most recent things, I'm going to ask you to look way back to when you were first coming to the attention of KRHD, and tell me what you did that made you attractive to that first station.
Well, with your help, of course, getting my resume taped together, all that good stuff, and I had an internship actually at CBS and KCAL in Los Angeles, working under those guys, Jim Hill, John Island, Gary Miller, and they actually let me do a lot of stuff in the field, which actually made my resume tape that much more attractive because I had more things covering big events, whether it was at the Rose Bowl, Laker games, Clipper games, you name it, Dodgers. Basically beefed up my resume, I feel like, and that kind of helped me out a bit because I had the big league stuff, so to speak, and then I also had my local angle, which was, my Taft High School stories and local high school sports, things of that nature.
The Taft Toreadors posted an exceptional regular season record of 21-3. Their only 3 losses come to teams that were not in the state of California.
So I feel like my resume helped me. I think just the potential that my news director saw in me also played a factor.
So having the shots of you after Laker games on the floor at Staples Center was useful.
From Staples, I'm Jahmai Webster for KCAL 9 Sports.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people all the time too, when you're in an internship, getting good with the photographers, because those guys can really help you and make you look good, and they'll allow you to do stand-ups if you ask. You got to be willing to put yourself out there and ask for the opportunity to do those things, because they know that you're there trying to better yourself and you want to move up in the business. So I'd always ask those guys anytime I go, hey, do we have 5 minutes? Can I shoot a quick stand-up? And whether you know what you're talking about or not, just get something on tape. That's the beauty of editing. You can always make it look together and make it look nice, but get comfortable doing that. I would say, being out in the field, doing stand-ups, have an opportunity, even maybe they'll let you go in the studio as well. Some of those guys allowed us later when you got more friendly with them, because they'd always say too, when you're an intern, meet everybody, put yourself out there. Don't just kind of show up and, okay, I'm gonna do the job, whatever they tell me to do, I'm gonna do it. Kind of meet people, talk to people, see what they're doing, and so they know who you are. And then when you ask them for help, they'll be more inclined to help you out.
And so the reel went on YouTube, and probably in those days also went to DVD.
Yep.
And you sent it, either the link or the DVD, to KRHD?
Yep. So I think, yeah, YouTube was kind of just, it seems like it's old technology, obviously, but it was one of those things that it wasn't that widespread at the time. People weren't really sending links, but I felt like that was the fastest way to get to somebody, and then they can open in their email and they can just click on it right away. And then they know if they like you or not, basically, in that first few minutes. But I sent a YouTube link to KRHD, to the news director, Dennis Kinney, and he watched it, and I think he called me maybe a week later. And the thing is, too, with the YouTube, you can also see who's clicking on it and what state they're in. So you kind of have an idea, like, oh, I think he saw my tape, so that kind of let me know that I saw that the station that I applied to in Texas was looking at my resume reel. So that helped me out because it got to him faster. Because you got to understand that when these jobs are open, especially lower market jobs, at the end of the semester or at the end of the fall, at the end of the spring, there's hundreds of applicants. So the faster you can get it to them, the quicker you can get that information out to them, the better for you, because they're able to look at it, they're able to get through it, and they're able to see, hey, I like this person. I found out that Dennis had a system. He'd be like, yes, maybe, no, obviously, but he put you in that pile and he go back and look at it again later and see if he felt the same way about it. So I found out that the YouTube link was fast, it was easy, and it was effective. And you're able to kind of check your stats and see where you are and see if those guys have at least clicked on your link there.
Now, you did a news demo and a sports demo, correct?
I had both.
Which do you think he looked at?
I sent him, if I remember correctly, I sent him the news/sports demo.
So you had a third demo, or
Yeah, so I had
elements?
news, and I had news and sports, and then I had just sports. So I believe I might have sent the news/sports because I actually remember a conversation he had where I did the dating story and I did my stand-up on the Opiate Library, and he was telling me about how my storytelling needed some work at the time.
Education and stability seem to be first priority, and serious committed relationships and marriage in your early 20s just isn't in the schedule of classes.
So he was telling me about that stand-up, so I believe I sent him the news/sports demo, and I mailed my sports demo to him, but I don't think he ever got that one.
Had they advertised for a sports person or a news person?
They had advertised for a sports person. It was a sports reporter job, I remember. But I think I did that. I sent him the link because I was like, this mail stuff takes too long. And it actually got there before the DVD did. So he looked at that tape, and I got a call back on that.
So the next step in the hiring process was what?
So after he saw my tape, he called me. He said, hey, I like your tape. But before we move further in the process, want to ask you some questions, kind of feel me out, basically. So we talked for about 5 or 10 minutes, and he asked me basic questions, what was I looking to do? There was no real discussions about money because at that point, they have the ultimate power because it's your first job. You really have no wiggle room in that regard. But it was a quick conversation, and then he said, all right, we'll call you X time next week. We'll do an official phone interview. So that's how I did it next. So he was basically telling me to brush up on these things, kind of familiarize myself with the area, the sports that they covered, the type of things that were big in the market, and just my overall news of Texas, because it was a basic news test that he actually gave me. So I did all my research, and the thing is too, I recommend that, if you get a job and they call you back, you should do as much research about that place as because you never know what can come up or what might even impress them. The fact that, you're a reporter, in your job, you do research regardless, of stories, and you get background on certain subjects. So when you're doing the job, you should approach it the same way because you could eventually end up living there. So I did my research on College Station, figured that Texas A&M was there, it was a big sports, the conference that they played in, the sports that they had, just did basic research, stuff like that. Didn't go too far in depth. They won't ask you any ambiguous questions, but just general knowledge. So once I did that, we had a phone interview, lasted maybe about half an hour. We talked, and then, I followed up with, when might I hear something next? And
that's an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you want to get a timeline, because you don't want to just be sitting and, a month passes by and you haven't heard a thing and you don't know where they're at in the hiring process. Because I've had jobs too in the past recently where they said, all right, we'll let you know something in a week or so. And a month has gone by and I finally reached back out and they're like, we've gone on a hiring freeze. So at that point, their hands are tied, but it would have been information that you would have liked to have had in advance. But I guess back to Dennis. So once we had our 30-minute phone interview, I asked him when might I hear something, and he said about a week from now, be making some decisions. And you want to ask, are you looking at other people? Obviously, you want to see where you kind of stand in the scrum there. So I think he had about 3 other candidates who he was looking at, so he wanted to interview, and then he called me a week later and offered me the job. So the rest is history, basically, but that's kind of how it played out.
How long did it take you to get down there?
I was lucky. It took me 2 months to get the job after I graduated from here, and I got there, I think I told him I get there in 4 weeks or something. Or I started 2 months after I graduated, I should say. So I think I went on the interview maybe in May, June, and I was out there in July.
Okay. Once there, were there any things that were surprising about that first job?
Yes. It was a job now. That's the fact. The fact that it was all on me, basically. And I was at a like you said, KXXV was the main hub. That's the main station. I was at a satellite station, which is a bureau. So I was a sports guy and I covered everything in the market from College Station to 100 miles out, basically, anything in our viewing area, and I was responsible for that. So basically, when I got to that job, I learned how to manage my time. It was all on me, basically, and the guys in Waco would look for me to feed them stuff and tell them stories and give them tips or whatever was going to go on the air that night. So I learned that I had all the responsibility, and I was basically the managing editor. I dictated what went on the air and what the level of importance was, as opposed to maybe, am I going to shoot high school football today, or am I going to shoot the, 3A, which is a smaller division swimming championship, you know what I mean? So I basically dictated what was in the show, what was going to be important. I held my own afternoon meetings once I got into work, basically, like by myself, figuring out what I was going to do. I mapped out the coverage and what was going to be throughout the week, because even on my days off, they still needed things to run. So I'd have to give them stories that they can run when I'm not there for 2 days during the week.
Wow. All right. So you're out there in the bureau by yourself? Are you shooting?
Yes. So I was shooting, I was editing, I was writing, I was producing. I did it all in that first gig. I do interviews on my own, one-man band, everything. Everything I did on my own. Had no help unless I did a live shot, then I'd get a photographer. But with the exception of that, I wouldn't have anything. But these days, with the TVU packs, which is the satellite live, basically it's a cell phone. They have MMJs shooting their own live shots. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case now.
We do have some students who are using those things.
Uh-huh.
So there came a time when you were looking for a bigger market.
Uh-huh.
And you certainly found a more exotic market.
Yeah,
in
to say the least, yeah.
At KITV.
Yep.
How did you go about getting from Waco, Texas to Honolulu?
So I started in College Station, and after a year, I got promoted to weekend anchor, so I moved to Waco. Because the sports director was out, so the weekend guy got promoted, then I moved into the second row, then we hired somebody to take my spot. So that after about 2 years, I first got there, by the way, I didn't have a contract. Like they didn't have me sign one. It was talk of one. I even asked about it. I said, hey, should I be signing a contract, or how does this work? And then Dennis, he told me, for this position, we don't have a contract, and most people in America don't have contracts at their job anyway, so it wasn't a thing really that big of a deal. But once I was promoted to weekend anchor, which is a more high-profile position, they want some stability, so I signed a contract. I signed a 1-year contract, got a pay increase, all that good stuff. So after the year was up, that was 2 years total with the company at the station. And I felt like, I couldn't learn anymore. I felt like I had hit a ceiling, like I just wasn't getting better. So I guess I was getting worse because I wasn't improving really. Everything I was doing, it just felt like kind of ho-hum, and I was just going through the motions. So I was like, I got to find something better, basically. And my contract was up. Actually, my contract had expired. My contract had been up. They were talks of re-signing me because they wanted to keep me around. And I was like, well, you know what, Dennis, I think I want to look elsewhere, but I don't have anything, so I can't leave this job, obviously. But it was kind of like he was gracious enough to allow me to kind of have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, so to speak. So I gave him a timeline, and I was like, I'm going to look in this period, give me a month to try to find something. If I don't, then I'll re-sign here. And he was cool enough to allow me to do that. Some news directors are not as friendly, so I recommend that if people have jobs, then they should look maybe 3 months in advance, because they don't want to have their contract expire, especially when you get in bigger markets. You don't want to have your contract expire and not have anything if you have plans to leave. But I ended up waiting. My news director was cool enough to allow me to look and also stay where I was, but he did post my job and take applicants at the same time. So I sent my tape again, basically anywhere around the country, but at this point it wasn't just small markets. Waco was 89, so I was like, I'm not going to go anything beyond that. Even if it was but I guess if it was a main anchor position, it was sports director, I might have taken it, because that would have been an upgrade, but I wasn't going to be a weekend anchor anywhere beyond market 89.
Lower than 89.
Exactly.
Right.
So all my focus was looking ahead, and I sent my tape all over, sent my tape to stations in Texas as well. Austin, I had a job there, and because I met people in the market, so I knew there was openings. That was another thing, building relationships with the people that you work with, even if they're not at the station that you're at. It's always a good thing, because you never know when you might see some of those folks down the line. But I sent it all over. Luckily enough, I got a few calls back, and Hawaii was one of those. And actually, I applied, and the next day they called me. And it was 5 hours time difference at the time, because it's 5 hours time difference from the central time zone during the fall, so or during the spring. And they called me the next day, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. So I was like, who's this 808? But I didn't answer. And ended up calling them back, and it was the main line, so I waited for them to call me back again, and they did. Talked to the sports director. It was Robert Kikaula who called me. Talked to him.
Wait a minute. What's that name again?
Robert Kikaula.
It's Hawaii.
Yeah, exactly. So he called me. First question was, how serious are you about coming to work here? Because it's Hawaii. Like, you're geographically at a disadvantage. You're so far from the continental U.S., all that stuff. So we talked about that. And once that came out, I was like, very interested. Obviously, I'm looking to upgrade. We talked and maybe went back and forth for a couple of weeks, just he and I having a conversation. And he was like, all right, he was basically filling me out, because I would work directly with him. And then maybe he was like, I guess, so after he and I talked, he put my name into the news director's ear, and he was like, I like this guy. I think I want to hire him. So she and I had a conversation, and it was basically informal. She basically called me just to say, okay, Robert really likes you. I'm going to take his word for it. So this is what's going to happen now. I need you to fill out this paperwork, stuff like that, preliminary stuff, and just so they can run a background check, that sort of thing. And once that happened, everything cleared, and then we were like negotiating salary. And at this point, it's my second job. So now I have a little bit of wiggle room. So they put out a number, and I was like, I think I want a little bit more. So this is like the first and only contract that I negotiated for myself. So because it was so far away, I had to negotiate moving expenses, what they'd help me with, and all that sort of stuff. So, and then housing as well. So they put me up in a hotel, had that happen because I'm moving to Hawaii. Never been there, never visited, nothing, only seen pictures. So I got that taken care of. And so about a month after the initial contact, we finally struck a deal, and then I moved out there.
I remember what you said when you got that. Actually, I remember two things. First, it seems they were advertising that you were coming before you actually went there.
Yeah.
I saw advertisements. I guess I saw them online. The other thing is that when you got there and you'd done all this negotiating, you said, finally, a station that is paying me. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
All right, okay.
I do.
So we don't want to know what the dollars were, but it is good to know that in the second market, dollars kind of went away as a big problem in your life.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Tremendously. Doubled my salary.
Good.
So that was a big deal because, for the first year, you're really struggling. Like, you just graduated from CSUN, you might have X amount of student loans, and you're like just trying to make it. And that can be frustrating at times, and that breaks a lot of people because you're not going to make a lot of money your first job. Some people might not make a lot of money in their second job, but if you stick to it, if you continue to get better and you continue to move up, the money will start to catch up with you.
Okay, so how did, on a day-to-day basis, the second job, the Hawaii job, differ from the Texas job?
So that differed because I had less responsibility, but more focus on specific things because I didn't have to shoot anymore. I got a photographer. Every time I had to shoot, I had a photographer. But I still had to write, obviously, edit, which was, yeah, the only, but the news people, they didn't edit. It was under a union now. So they had photographers who shot and edited everybody else's, but sports in the market wide, they all edit their own stuff because it's just a different animal, It's difficult, which I find now because I don't edit. I have people who edit my things now. But in Hawaii, I still had to write, edit, produce, and obviously go out there and present it on the air. But I had guys shooting my stuff, so I had to kind of manage other people's schedules and what I wanted and things that we needed because I had to also still just focus on what was the coverage plan for the week because I had to figure out what was being shot and who was going to shoot it. But I also work with the assignment editor and the news department because we didn't have a sports photographer per se. Every photographer was fair market for anybody. So that was the thing is I didn't have to focus so much on other things, but I had to delegate jobs, and I also I got an opportunity to actually just focus on being a anchor, focus on just getting better at that, my writing, my presentation, all of that, and it helped me because I didn't have to worry about shooting anymore, which was just another thing. It was more so like now I can work on my craft, and that's what the second job provided.
By that time, it sounds like you're managing other people.
Yeah.
Did you also have interns working with you?
I did. I had quite a bit of interns. So I had quite a bit of interns, and it was different because like here I am, 22 years old, so 24 at the time, and like interns are like 19, 20-year-old high school or college, freshmen and sophomores or whatever. So it's kind of funny because we'd always go out in the field and we'd be the two youngest guys, and here I am, and here they are looking to me for some guidance, and I'm like, I've been in this business 2 years more than you have. So it's kind of funny to have an intern, but
you had fought 2 wars. You'd gotten hired by 2 stations.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. So I had a little more experience, obviously, but yeah, so I had interns and had to manage them as well and teach as well because they didn't know anything. They came in wanting to learn as well.
Did you manage all your moves without an agent?
So once after a year in Hawaii, I still post my videos on YouTube. Just recent work and stuff that I wanted to do. Either if I was looking for a job, and then some of my old stuff that I posted from when I left Waco was still on YouTube. So I had people calling me now, actually. So agents would call me and be like, hey, we like your stuff. You got potential. We want to represent you. Are you represented by anybody? And I was like, no, I haven't had an agent up to this point. Plus, when I got to Hawaii, the contract was for 3 years. Usually, people sign 2 years, but this is a long contract, And I was like, I just got here. Like, I'm gonna be here for the next 3 years, so I don't need anybody to represent me now. So they stopped calling. But one guy in particular, my agent now, he just kind of stuck to it. He just wouldn't leave me alone. So he would check in every so often, and it got to I had a year left on my contract. He was like, we can, like, you're a great talent. We can get you some bigger jobs, and like, I'd like to represent you still. We kind of formed this relationship, and because we had that relationship, I was like, all right, let's do it. So I ended up signing with him, and after that, I just send him my stuff because he has somebody who edits everything, and they send it out. But I did get an agent after 4 years in the business without working with one.
And did that agent help manage the move to the current station?
Yep, helped manage the move. And actually, because my contract was for 3 years, but I had to, like, after my contract expired, I didn't have any other jobs, so I had to stick around in Hawaii for an extra year. So he helped renegotiate that year contract, and also got me a raise there in Hawaii. And once that contract expired, we also sought for other jobs in bigger markets, which is Denver was on one of the lists. So he helped reach out to the station in Denver. Like, I didn't even talk to the people. He had the connections, knew the job was coming open before it even was posted. So that sort of thing is where he helped me out, because he had advantages to where he had relationships with these news directors in bigger markets that I didn't have, which I found out the relationships are, they can make or break you, basically, who you know and what you know and how you know them. So he helped me with that. And he had a relationship with the news director who was there at the time. And he sent him
with the Denver news director,
Yeah.
who is now gone?
Who is now gone, yes. Who is now gone. So I got hired in Denver. A week later, he called me and told me he was taking a job in Cleveland, so where he's from. So that's kind of how it worked out. But he had a relationship with the Denver news director, and they also had about 5 candidates that they were looking at. But I had a phone interview with them. I had a Skype interview, which was a first for me. Never had that before with the entire department. And called me a week later and offered me the job.
And then you go.
And then I go.
And it's smooth.
Yep.
and you're dealing with a different level of team now than you were dealing with, and player, than you were dealing with in Honolulu.
Yep, absolutely. Big market 17, a significant jump from 69, which is where Hawaii is, in Honolulu. So it was like when I took the job from College Station to Waco to Hawaii, it was the same amount of responsibility, but now also the management, they just look for me to be the best anchor I could be, basically. So they just want me to be the best representation of a sportscaster I can be, and they allow me to focus on that. So now I got there and I write, I anchor, I edit when necessary, but it's been 3 months and I might have edited 5 things to this point. So it's always the photographers, and they have editors whose job is specifically to edit, who take part in all the editing.
Which shows are you anchoring?
So I work Wednesday through Sunday. Wednesday, I primarily report. So I go to Broncos and get sound, report from there, whatever's going on in the day's news. And I come back, and at 10 o'clock, I give it to whoever's anchoring, which is a guy named Aaron Anderson. He's anchoring, so I tell him what's going on, what he can run in the VOSAT form. So that's what I do on Wednesdays. I'm a reporter. Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sunday. Thursday and Friday, I'm anchoring for sure, solo by myself. Saturday, we have a 15-minute sportscast that both of us anchor. And then Sunday, we have a half an hour show that both of us anchor. So for the early shows, which is 5 o'clock, so weekends 5 and 5 o'clock, we just have a 5 o'clock. So it's an hour-long 5. If it's an early show, say the Broncos play at 2 o'clock, I'll be out at the stadium. I'll get post-game locker room. I'll do a live shot from the game, and then I'll come back in the studio for 10 o'clock. And then we put together the show, all of us.
It sounds hectic.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like, I feel like on the weekends especially, when I walk in the door, I'm just in the computer. I'm just typing away, writing my scripts, getting everything out, getting it to them to edit. And I feel like I don't stop until moments before I walk on the air usually.
Do you have help from interns there?
We have no interns there because we work for a company, Scripps, which pays interns. And they only pay 2 a year. And this year, they've actually decided not to have any. So no interns here, but there is more people in the department, so to speak. I came from a 3-person sports department in Texas where I was the number 3 guy, and then I moved up to number 2. I got to Hawaii, it was just 2 of us, sports director and a weekend guy, which was my position. And now I get to Denver, and we don't have a main guy, so to speak. Once they hired me, they decided to get away with that. So my title really is evening sports anchor. That's really my title. And so it's me and another sports anchor. We have a sports producer / photographer, and we also have some editors who help us out.
Do you ever think about going back into news? You did news when you were here.
You know what? There's more money in news, that's for sure. You can get paid more, and I've found in 6 years now, almost 7 in the business, that a lot of sports guys make that transition. And it seems to be a common thing because with sports, so much is thrown at you, and you're asked to do so much that once you get to news, your skills are that much better than maybe somebody who's been doing it because you can ad-lib, because you're asked to do that quite a bit. You can do things on the cuff, and you're kind of in control of your emotions most of the time because you're always, it seems like things are going 100 miles per hour. So I've seen a lot of guys transition over to news and become either morning anchors because they have personality, and they're asked to do that on a morning show quite a bit, or even to the news evening anchors. So a couple of, like 2 or 3 of the main guys in Hawaii were former sportscasters who are doing news now and have been for the last 15, 30 years.
I watched one yesterday at a station where in Delaware, where we have a student working, a former sports guy who became main anchor. He's extremely credible. And of course, years ago, Bryant Gumbel did that, coming from Channel 4 in Los Angeles and going to the Today Show and lots of other things. Final words for people who are where you were about 7 years ago, who are just now looking to hit the job market. You've already told them, you've already given them the basics. Is there any sort of last thing, maybe something you did wrong that you would like them to avoid?
I feel like I waited too long to have an internship. I did it in my last semester, my last year of college. I think that the things that I learned in the live business, so to speak, where guys were doing it every day and they're putting on a news product, were invaluable assets that helped me out. And those relationships, because those guys know people, they've been to where you're trying to go. They knew people in small markets, and I feel like I could have been fostering those relationships years before. But, you know, you get busy with work and stuff, but I would have took more internships for sure. That's one thing I would have done because that helped me tremendously. So that's I feel like a mistake I made, but in the end, it worked out. That and the fact that, you know, you get projects all the time in class. Obviously, we had packages we had to do every week, but I try to do more, because the more comfortable you get on the air, the more seasoned you appear to be, and the more comfortable you get, and it shows on camera. You can tell when somebody's green and when somebody has experience. So I wish I would have had more reps, so to speak. More repetition, more anchoring. And I even try to do it all the time, like even with Valley View. Like I try to be in every show. Obviously you couldn't, but just try to get that experience, even when you can. Or you know, just try to make yourself camera ready, you know, all the time.
Welcome to Valley View News. I'm Dare DiGirolamo.
And I'm Jahmai Webster.
You may have noticed that he checked the phone a couple of times. This is a man who got married how many months ago?
What is it? Where are we in December? So August? So about 3 months ago now.
That video exists, I think, still on the website of his old station in Hawaii, and his reel that he did that got him down to Texas is still in the newsroom if someone wants to see what some of his secrets have been. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lincoln. Always a pleasure, man, to come back.
This is Pat.
All right.